welcome to Pause for Payments with Kristy. I am really excited to have with me here today Liz Lumley, who is a global leader in all things fintech and payments. Liz is currently based in London, so welcome, Liz.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Kristy. I always love sitting down for a chat with you, and actually saying the word global just really makes you think of all the places I've traveled in the world and all the times I've seen you at conferences in different cities, and someday we will get that again. I'm really glad that technology exists that we can speak this way.
Well, virtual is better than nothing is my theory anyway. Kind of like going to the gym for 10 minutes is better than going for 0 minutes, right?
Yeah.
For today's discussion, I want to talk about building careers as women in fintech. And we all know it's pretty much a global phenomenon that fintech is, for some reason, so heavily dominated by men. But Liz has been incredibly successful as a woman in this industry. And I want to explore that with you and talk about your successes. And maybe you'll share some of your secrets of success with our audience. So, assuming you didn't envision fintech as your end goal when you were a little girl, can we start by talking about your amazing career journey and how you actually ended up here?
Yes. So what I wanted to be as a little girl is I wanted to be a journalist. That was very, very determined. So I went to a university that was known for its journalism department. I went to Hofstra University in New York and did, internships and all the things involved with journalism. And when I graduated, I just, sort of sent my resume to anything that said reporter, Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., just absolutely any publication. And the one that offered me a job was a publication out of Waters Information Services called Inside Market Data. So, which covered the real-time market data industry at investment banks. Now, I saw reporter, New York, a salary I could just about survive on. And I went, yep. And I barely knew what a stock was. So it was a huge learning curve. So, I ended up spending about 5 years there. I was editor of the derivatives publication there. That's the company that sent me over to London. So yes, that was very much capital markets, investment banking. So that real-time market data world. And I ended up actually going back to Waters a few years later when it had been purchased by Incisive Media in London, and I launched Inside Reference Data publication for them as part of that group. When I originally worked for Waters, it was an independent company and then went through a few acquisitions. So that publication has been going on for 13 years. So that covered like enterprise data at investment banks. And it was announced at the annual meeting at the time, 2006, that by the CEO, Tim Weller. I believe he's no longer the CEO, but he announced it was the most successful organic launch Incisive Media ever did.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Well, that explains. Sorry,
go
ahead.
I just want to say, I mean, I had advice a long time ago as a journalist that I shouldn't stay in one sector. I should. So I didn't expect when I moved to New York, 1994, 22 years old, that I would be writing about financial technology for 26 years. But I did just end up staying, and I think I stayed for a number of reasons. One, it did allow me to travel around the world. I moved to another country. I found other parts of financial services industry that were very interesting. I just ended up, really, I think I'm one of the few journalists that was fintech from the start. That was what I did. And for a long time, people didn't understand what financial technology was, what financial data was. And then, of course, about over a decade ago, fintech now made us cool for a brief period. So it wasn't by design, but yeah, that's how I ended up staying in this industry for so long, because it was giving me, what I wanted out of life. I was a journalist. I launched publications. I traveled the world, met interesting people. Banking is not the boring, dry subject that I think a lot of people think. Right. I think a lot of people think it's filled with very boring people, and I'm like, well, it's not. There's boring and interesting people in every sector. But yeah, that's how I just ended up not leaving the industry and being sort of a sector expert on this particular world.
Well, that explains a couple of things. And I guess before this discussion, I didn't realize that you started off in journalism, but that explains why you're so articulate, which is fantastic. And it really, I think, helps you to articulate, especially in an industry that may not be full of good articulators. The techno geeks tend not to be articulate, for example. But it also explains, because you've been in this industry in a couple of different markets, you've got the depth of understanding, and that comes with time and experience within an industry.
Yeah. There's a blog that's been like living rent free in my head for quite some time, and we'll probably get into it when we talk about the startup world. Is one of the things that really makes me angry is when people say things like, "Well, you're just a journalist. You're just a writer. You don't understand our industry like we do." Now, granted, technically, I have never got a paycheck from a bank, but I have spoken to more people who work at banks than you've had hot dinners. I have spoken. I once, to give very, very strangely, I was talking to someone from, I don't know if I should mention the bank. I mean, they're huge. There's thousands of people that work from like Citibank, right? And I asked him some question about budgets and IT budgets, about, what's the percentage between change the bank and run the bank? And he looked at me and he went, "How do you know our internal terms?" And I was like, that's that's a term that's used at other banks. And you can kind of see that sometimes, even though people that technically work in the industry, they I know this is, payments focused, but they might just know payments. Right. I've written about derivatives trading. I've written about routers underneath the floor at the bank. I've written about payments. I've written about regulations. I've talked to all of those people. So my knowledge as just a journalist is wide and it's vast. And to dismiss that, I think, shows some people's insecurity.
Well, their lack of understanding of your role, really, which is really short-sighted and unfortunate. Well, I'm sorry you've had those experiences. That's unfair to you. It's not giving you full credit.
Everyone gets it. I've seen it directed at other journalists, especially if they write a piece that might be critical, of something that's going on. And it's like, well, what the hell do they know? Especially if the author's a woman, by the way. And it's like, well, that piece was probably investigated and there were lots of people that they probably spoke to. And yeah, so.
Yeah, so the research is a huge part of that. So you've got this amazing experience and you've worked with some interesting accelerators I didn't realize until I looked at your LinkedIn profile. Invest Tokyo and Syed Business School at Oxford, and now BC Innovations. Gosh, that one's on fire.
Global domination.
Indeed. But for our audience in particular, women in payments, can you tell us how you've navigated to such a successful point in your career as a woman in these very male-dominated markets?
So, there's a lot of talk right now about kind of what diversity means. And, I think there's a lot of silencing rhetoric that tells people to stop talking about gender, and I agree with parts of that diversity should mean a whole lot. There's a whole lot, many groups of people that have been excluded from positions of power and positions of influence. But I think that there's something that affects women as a group, no matter who you are, no matter what socioeconomic group you come from, no matter what race or religion you come from, or, able-bodied, that I think women are raised to think that who we are is not good enough, no matter what you do. So you're either not smart enough to be there, or not pretty enough to be there, not thin enough to be there. And many women on all different groups are told, you don't have a right to be in that room unless you're perfect. And I think that affects more women than I think it affects almost every woman. And that just is not told to men. I mean, there are people, I know I can hear Twitter right now, there are people that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds that will probably say, I'm a man and I didn't feel like I belonged in that room. And I get that. But as a group, almost all women are told, you're not good enough to be there. And I think what you need to do as a woman to tell yourself that you have a right to be in that room, just like everyone else. You have someone put on Twitter, it was Martin Luther King Day in the US the other day, and someone said, God grant me the confidence of white men lecturing Martin Luther King's son on his father's legacy. And it was like a Twitter thread of men correcting a tweet about a quote Martin Luther King said, right? So I'm thinking, yeah, men don't walk into a room and think they don't belong there. And women do, and we need to stop doing that. So you need to say, you have a right to be on that stage. You have a right to have a viewpoint. You have a right to write this article. You have a right to start this company. You have a right to ask for the raise. You have a right to that promotion. You don't have to be grateful to have a job or a career. You have a right to have agency over your life and to determine how your life is going forward. And you will never be smart enough or pretty enough or thin enough or fashionable enough, because no one is.
Nor the men either, but somehow it's not part of their psyche. And
exactly. Yeah, it's not. I mean, yeah, I've said this before. I mean, of all the thousands of people I've interviewed on camera, only one guy, and this is like 80% of the people I interviewed were men, fussed about his hair. Every single woman I interviewed, oh God, I need to leave town. Oh my God, my makeup. And they're sitting there gorgeous. Makeup, hair, like scarves. I'm like, what are you doing? I've seen men have sat in front of me with like food stains, They just is not bred into them the way it is for women. And women, we just need to keep on telling it to ourselves. You have a right. You have a right to your own agency. You have a right to direct your life, and you have a right to be in any room that you choose.
And this sounds a little bit different from something I've often heard about, this imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what I don't like about when people talk, like in terms of imposter syndrome, or also in terms of like perfection, women are told, what is it? We don't apply for jobs unless we meet 100% of the criteria, and it's somehow our fault. And I think that's because, when I'm talking about it affects all women, it's a structural perception that this is, women sometimes aren't interviewed unless they meet 100% of the criteria. Men are allowed to feel, to be potential, and women have to have proved their worth beforehand. And there's a lot of things that are hitting that. And you do have to be kind of like a bulldozer and keep on moving forward. And having those sort of positive thoughts. I mean, there was a thing, I hate to say this because this is nothing as this particular person, but there was a news item that came out yesterday in the UK that Tom Bloomfeld, founder of Monzo, is stepping down as from the company. He had stepped down from CEO a few months ago. He's now leaving the company entirely. And he spoke to TechCrunch about how, as the company was growing and scaling, he sees himself as a startup guy, and the role as a CEO as the company got bigger just was kind of beyond him. The pandemic was, running havoc with his mental health, all very honest stuff. And I'm reading it, and all the people on Twitter are like, this is honest, this is refreshing, it's really great he's saying that. All of those things are true, but as a white male, he has the privilege to say that. A woman, if she had said that, I realized I wasn't up to that job. The pandemic has wreaked havoc with my mental health. It would have been like, you weren't up to our standard. You can't hack it. You can't play with the big boys. And, men have a privilege to be vulnerable. I'm sorry, I went down a road I didn't think I was going to go down. I looked at the question, my pat answers. It's supposed to be about positive and believe in yourself and superwoman, but there is a lot of stuff attacked at women, And, you know, men, when we talk about privilege, men have the privilege to say, this is my potential. I haven't proven it yet. Men have the privilege to say, I'm vulnerable. And women just don't have that safety yet. And I think what we need is more women just pushing forward and being seen in positions of leadership, being seen to fail, being seen to succeed, and to make that a bit more normal. And I think that's the only way that'll slowly change.
Well, I think you're right. We need more women in leadership positions to be role models, to engage not only the employees, but shareholders, the public, and lead by example and
Yeah.
show us that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to bring your authentic self to whatever you do. We just somehow don't seem to get up. And I fall into that trap too. I remember when I worked at a big bank, I saw this job posting. I thought, oh, that looks like an interesting job. And there were 10 requirements and I could tick 6 boxes. And I thought, oh, well, better wait till next time, and it puts my career 2 years back. And probably the guy who got it could only tick 4 boxes.
Exactly. And then he the job for 2 years, can't do it. Then they end up giving you the job anyway. Yeah. Oh, well.
Yes. And we've heard of cases like that too.
Yeah.
Often. So you've got this amazing career and you've got to the point where you can say things out loud without fear of repercussion, which is it's a nice place to be. It shows that you've got some credibility and a track record and some, great respect and a fantastic reputation in the industry. Are there any failures in your career that you can share that you've learned from? Is there anything that you want to, tell our audience, watch out for this bump in the road?
I looked at this and I thought, sometimes when you see people answer these types of questions, they say something vague like, I wish I was more confident in my 20s. But I'm going to tell a very specific story. And I consider this to be the biggest mistake I made personally in my career, which coincidentally is also the biggest learning experience I ever had. So, just because there are failures in life, sometimes, but the biggest failures I've had in my life has also been the thing that has changed me the most and has made me learn the most. So I left, my Finextra, just 7 years to go be managing director of Startup Bootcamp FinTech, this was me leaving my 20-year journalism career to go run an accelerator program, in the FinTech space. And Startup Bootcamp approached me. And so we had been talking for a while back and forth about taking on the role. It took a few months, as usually some interviews have. We got to kind of the later stage of that process. And the founder of the program said, of the FinTech program, said the board really wants you to have a helper, an entrepreneur helper, someone who's launched a FinTech company to help you with some things that you might not have experience with, like term sheet negotiation and, pitching to a VC, right? And it all seemed really kind of, I was like, all right. I said, well, we'll give you some choices. You can talk to them and pick one who will be the entrepreneur in residence. That was my first mistake. That was mistake number one. I should have said, you want me, you hire me. But anyway, I met a guy. He seemed okay. He had started a business. And in my head, he was going to be there a couple days a week. He was not stepping down from his role as CEO of his own company. He'd be on call if I needed questions, but he was basically going to be support and help for me. Of course, there's a 3-month notice period. I resigned from my job. 3-month notice period was kind of exhausting. I did 4 events in 3 months, left on a Friday, started on a Monday as managing director of Startup Bootcamp FinTech, 3 weeks before selection days for the cohort of the program happened. So there had been a lot going on before I joined. And the founder of the company introduced me to everyone and said, here's Liz. She's now arrived. She's the new MD of the program. She will be working with so-and-so, the co-MD of the program. And I thought, and I panicked. I thought to myself, they don't think I can do this. And that was my mistake number 2. And, this person then ended up really undermining me and not being that great to work with. However, the failure was mine, because I should have then that day pulled them aside and said, I did not agree to this. This is not what I thought I was walking into. And I got scared and I panicked. Now, that experience was very hard and very difficult, but I learned a lot of things. I learned my worth. Don't let anyone walk over you. Don't let someone use you because they think you have a certain amount of fame and Twitter followers and people know you. If I go into a project, it's like, I'm in charge. You've hired me to be in charge. I'm in charge. And this is how this is going to go. That was my biggest failure. And it was my mistake, because, you're always going to work with people who maybe aren't that great to work with, or maybe not that nice to you, but the ultimate failure was mine, that I didn't stop that when I could have, instead of panicking and not stopping it.
Well, gosh, I probably would have done something similar in your situation. I'm sorry to hear that, Liz.
That's
okay. That's an awful experience, and it's terrible that they didn't show the confidence in you to do the job on your own. That's not fair at all, and it's not fair that you had to go through that. And it is a lesson that you have fantastic expertise and experience to bring to that role, and should have been doing it on your own, and not to push them to deliver on the role that they had offered you to run that accelerator. That's unfortunate.
Oh well,
but it's good learnings.
It's not running anymore. But anyway,
you see, if you had been there, the story might have ended differently.
Cool. Yeah, moving on. I'm much happier now.
Well, yeah, sometimes these things happen for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So I want to talk a little bit about, and we've kind of skirted around this a little bit, women finding their voice, especially in places like fintech, which is so male dominated. You've been fantastic at finding your voice, and maybe some of these experiences have kind of contributed to that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found your voice? Like, were there little light bulbs that went off in your head one day that said, okay, I'm going to start, asserting my voice? Or how did that happen for you?
Well, I mean, I've never been afraid of expressing my opinion. So that's just my personality. So I'm not a big favor of giving people advice saying you should copy what I do, because I really think you should follow, your own personality and your own style. And, I think there are some people I know that are really great at writing these wonderful blog posts and doing research and finding their voice that way. And some people are very good at being on podcasts, and some people, you have to find out, like, whether not everyone likes speaking out loud. Some people, so you need to find where your voice fits with your own comfort zone. But it kind of really did start at Finextra, where I was doing like a web, the old school webinars, and the company we're working with that I had known for a while, this guy, he's now retired. He said, Liz, why don't you moderate it? And I'm like, and he's like, why don't you do it? And that was kind of one of the first times I spoke on a camera. And, I just thought, yeah, no one died. It was probably not the best thing I ever did. And then whenever I wrote a blog, sort of people seemed to like the way I write. And it just it went from there, this when you start finding your voice, don't expect, we have a young staff content member at VC Innovations that we were talking to her today about hosting a podcast, and she was like, oh no, oh my God, I can't, I don't have enough expertise. And, we were like, no, we'll help you and support you. But you don't, when you learn, start small, when you start tweeting or posting on LinkedIn or doing blogs or speaking on podcasts, it's not going to be perfect the first time. You need to practice and do it over and over again until you feel much more comfortable speaking out loud. And if you are someone who's opinionated like me, you will get pushback from people who don't agree with you. You will. Some of it is, I've been kind of lucky that I haven't had anyone like attack me the way some people like maybe who write about politics or whatever get. People tend to have been attacked. One person did attack me, which is written about in Wired. But people will push back. There will be sometimes people will push back. It's one of those things that's hard to prove. Just being a woman with a voice, they'll question that viewpoint, and it does can kind of see it, the pushback on it, but you do need to be able to handle that a little bit, like have a slightly thick skin, realize that there are people that will disagree with you. I made a decision 2 years ago not to argue with men about feminism on Twitter anymore. I just, what, I'm done. Go read a book. If someone comes back at me with something stupid, I just completely give them no space, no oxygen. It's just like, it's just not worth it. It's not, to me, that doesn't further any conversation, doesn't further any discussion. It doesn't make any difference. And it really, I got inspired by this article that I think that was in Harper's, which was titled "Why I Don't Argue with Men About Feminism." And there was a line in it that said, for some of these men who come back with, why do you care if a dress has pockets? It's like men get discriminated against as well. For them, they're arguing whether Superman can beat Batman. For us, we're arguing for our life. And that's why I'm like, and as soon as I saw that, I went, I don't argue with men arguing whether Batman can beat Superman anymore.
Well, pick your battles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Great insights. I love this. And building up to it, I find it's so true. And I remember them telling me when I was in my 20s that, oh yeah, women in their, later stages of life, they get so much more confidence. They don't care what people think. And I thought, oh, really? I look forward to that day. And now it's true. I don't care what people think.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, it's liberating.
Yeah. I've been here a while, boys. This is not our first rodeo.
Yeah. Lots more responses, like, too bad, so sad.
Very true.
Will you indulge us and tell us about VC Innovations? I've been watching from this side of the pond and how it's grown over the last couple of years. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, we came together. So it was started by Victor Cruz, who came from Informa. And it was really to do a new style marketing, content, events business. So, we launched the FinTech Talents Festival in 2018, and we really wanted that festival to have a different look and feel. We had live music, we had craft beer. We tried to really change around some of the sessions so that they were more interactive and engaging. I really hate, I've been to events where people sleep. You see them asleep in like row 24, and I wanted the speakers, sitting in with the audience at tables, and there was a lot more. So we're a marketing services business and a content management business. We work with HSBC and Finastra and GitHub and Yaply and Mambu, and so all our clients are on our website. But most of what we did, see, this is Slack. This is as much, I've tried to turn off Slack 4 times. Anyway, I'm turning it off again. So, most of what we did was centered around what we call experiences, which were mostly physical events. So the big festival, we were supposed to have the FinTech Talents 2020 Festival at the Brewery in London, which is a venue that's well known to a lot of people in the space. We had breakfast round tables. We ran the FinTech Cocktail Club. But then, of course, the pandemic happened. So we went online. So, and we now have a lot more a lot more services. So, we basically, you're looking for content needs, marketing help, and our main focus is, lead generation, connections for companies. So we're working with a company called, Yapily right now. We're working with Playo. We're doing a lot of projects with Marqeta, which is a, payments company. They're our headline sponsor for our Lending 3.0 event, which is coming up on February 24th. And also for an event that's soon to be launched beginning of February called Digital Builder. So Marqeta works very closely with us. And these are two events that they're headline sponsors of, but they kind of came to us and said, can you put this together for us? Because we think this is needed in the industry. So our main goal of all of our activities are, there's content, there's education, there's discussion, but there's also, connections and networking. We're trying to create these experiences so that people you want to speak to are going to be in that room. Lead generation is, data building that's what we do constantly here to build that up. I went to an event a couple of years ago where I spoke to someone on the floor and he said, I bought this booth because of all the great names on the agenda. And these names come into the venue, they go to the green room, they go to the stage and they leave. And to me, to us, that was like a con. So our role is, those pre-meetings, connecting with people, warm intros, making sure that, if you sponsor with us, you're not just like, here's your booth, goodbye. We're very, very much involved with making sure that you get the connections that you want. So yeah, so that's so I'm more like pitching our instead of saying what we do. So anyway, we've got a lending event, we've got North America coming up in March, we've got Identity coming up in March. We're working on a big online hybrid festival in February, and then we do Vox Pop reports and small virtual roundtables, and anyway, call us for all of your content event needs.
Fantastic. Well, I love that way of just trying to engage the market, right? I think that's a big part of what we do too, is allowing women to connect with each other and build networks, build relationships, build their expertise, build, opportunities. It's so powerful. Last question, Liz. This has been a great discussion. I've learned so much and it's always so inspiring talking to you, but you've had this amazing career and, ups and downs, but amazingly insightful. And you've got this amazing expertise within fintech and financial services in general on, both sides of the pond, so to speak, and globally. It's fantastic global experience and perspective. Is there career advice that you want to share with our audience of women in payments, rising stars from around the world?
So as sort of alluded this earlier on in our discussion, if you're looking at financial services as a woman, don't think immediately it is male dominated, but as you can see, from your organization, there's lots of women around. Don't be afraid, although I have been the only woman in a room, and the only woman on stage, you won't be alone, and those things are changing. So don't be afraid to come into this industry, which can be very rewarding because you won't be the only one. There's lots of women to meet who will get, at different stages of their career, who, could be everything from a mentor to just someone you have a glass of wine with, and everyone in between. And so I would say, don't be afraid of this industry. Most people in this industry aren't tech experts. I know people who run technology teams that aren't engineers and aren't coders, and coding is probably going to be taken over by robots anyway. Don't think that you have to have a super technical background to be in this industry. You don't. A lot of men don't. And anything you don't know, you can learn. Everything is learnable. So I would say this is a very rewarding world. It's a very global world. If you're someone that wants to see the world, the banking and financial services, this is a good place to be, because that industry, I've always argued a little bit about financial services as a sector being so very different from other sectors because it's embedded in everything we do. Financial services is embedded in your life, in your work, in your day-to-day activities. You run a cupcake store, you're gonna need bill paying and point of sale and counting and payroll and loans, and all of that is financial services. Insurance. You can't, unless you live in a cabin in Montana off the grid, and you are going to be involved with a bank or a financial services firm or a fintech firm. Somehow money needs to move around in all those pipes and all those highways that go all over the world. So you get insight into other industries, and it can be very, very rewarding. So it's not boring, it's not conservative, it's not staid, it's exciting, and there are lots of other women here, so you won't be alone.
Awesome. I like that. Do not be afraid. You won't be alone, and yes, go forth and prosper.
Yes.
I agree with you. It's a really interesting and exciting industry to get into. And once you build some expertise and build up a network, you can build a global perspective, which is fantastic. And women bring so much.
In terms of like payments, a lot of people argue about the future of banks, but you will, no matter where we're going, you always have to pay for something. That those mechanisms are going to be there. You're going to have to pay for something. The money has to be moved somehow. That industry has a long, long shelf life.
Yeah, I agree. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Liz. It's been a fantastic discussion, as always, and as expected. I love hearing about your career journey, starting off in journalism and getting into financial services in a kind of a general way, starting in New York City, and then ultimately moving over to the UK. And gosh, you've been there for a while now.
Yeah, 26 years. I moved. I've been in London for 3 months. Went back to New York. I permanently moved here the weekend Princess Diana died. Okay. That was the weekend I moved here permanently. This was very interesting.
Okay, so she was calling you.
No, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to go into dark humor, but no.
That's good. Well, you filled a void for the UK and for fintech.
I was like, I'm the queen of fintech heart.
There you go. There you go. Okay. So thank you for doing what you do. We all learn so much from you and love your leadership and your pioneering style and what you do for women across this industry around the world. So thank you for doing that.
And yeah, thank you for organizations like you as well. I mean, I always cite your summits, symposiums, because when people say, oh, we can't find women speakers, we can't find senior women speakers, I'm like, I went to a Kristy Duncan event where everyone was a speaker, so that's bullshit.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we try to dispel that rumor around the world. And actually, we're launching in Latin America this year too. So cool. Another continent to dispel that rumor for sure.
Lovely. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. All right.